You never realize how much space there is in a house until you have a kid. Every room, every corner, suddenly becomes a stage for imagination, or a hazard. Our son, Evan, had just turned 4, and the house felt like it was constantly humming with his energy. He ran from room to room like a pinball, dragging his little plastic fire truck and making siren noises loud enough to rattle the windows. We live in a modest 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood just outside of Portland. The kind of place with friendly mailmen, barking dogs behind every fence, and an unspoken 9 p.m. silence rule. It was peaceful, perfect for starting a family. Or so we thought. It started one rainy Tuesday afternoon. I remember because I was working from home, staring blankly at a spreadsheet when I heard Evan talking in his room. Not unusual. He was always chattering, usually with his stuffed tiger, Mr. Boots. But this time, his voice was low. Not the usual enthusiastic babble. He was whispering. I got up and padded quietly down the hallway. His door was open just a crack. I peeked in. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, his back to me, facing the closet. No toys out, no Mr. Boots. Just Evan, and the half-open closet. Knock knock, he said in that sing-song voice kids use when they're making up games. Then silence. A beat passed. He nodded and whispered, Okay, but only for a little while. Hey, bud, I said, pushing the door open, trying not to spook him. Who you talking to? He turned around and gave me that wide-eyed, almost guilty smile kids give when they've been caught doing something weird. My friend, he said simply. Oh yeah? Which friend? He lives in the closet. I laughed, a little unsure. In the closet, huh? That doesn't sound comfy. Evan shrugged. He likes small places. I walked in, more curious than concerned at that point, and looked into the closet. Just the usual. Clothes, a few toys on the floor, and a shoebox filled with old coloring books. Nothing out of place. What's your friend's name? I asked. Evan stood up and looked at me with this sort of quiet seriousness that caught me off guard. He doesn't like names, he said. But he told me a secret. Oh? What kind of secret? He leaned in and cupped a hand to my ear. He knows about the man in the basement. We don't have a basement. I blinked at him. What man? But Evan just giggled and ran out of the room, back into the world of sirens and toy trucks. I stood there, looking at the closet, heart ticking just a little faster than before. The next day, I brought it up with my wife, Claire. We were cleaning up after dinner, Evan in the living room, absorbed in his nightly ritual of building a Lego tower just to smash it to bits. He's got an imaginary friend now, I said casually, wiping down the counter. She looked up from the sink. Really? That's kinda cute. What's their name? I hesitated. He said, he doesn't like names. The friend, I mean. And apparently he lives in the closet. Claire snorted. Of course he does. Classic kid logic. Monsters in the closet, under the bed, ghosts in the attic. Yeah, but he said something weird yesterday. I dried my hands and leaned against the counter. He told me his friend knows about the man in the basement. Claire frowned, her hands pausing in the soapy water. We don't have a basement. Exactly. She gave a small laugh, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Maybe he picked it up from a show. Some cartoon or YouTube video. You know how stuff sticks with them. That made sense. I wanted it to make sense. I nodded, let it go. That night, after Evan was asleep, I checked the parental filters on his tablet and shows. Nothing weird. Just the usual mix of animated animals and sing-alongs. Nothing about basements or nameless closet dwellers. Still, kids are sponges. Maybe it was just one of those creepy things toddlers say sometimes. Later, when I went in to check on him, I found the closet door open again. We usually kept it closed, it tended to creak. But it was wide open now, the darkness inside pressing out into the room. Evan was fast asleep, breathing slow and even, curled up on his side like always. I crossed the room quietly, closed the door gently. As I turned to leave, I heard something. A faint tap-tap sound. From inside the closet. I froze. My hand was still on the doorknob. It was probably just the house settling. Or maybe one of his toys had slipped and fallen in the dark. I stayed there another moment, holding my breath, listening. Silence. Then Evan stirred in his bed and mumbled something. Don't make him mad. A few days passed with nothing out of the ordinary. Evan seemed his usual self, playing, laughing, being a little goofball. I started to convince myself it really was just toddler make-believe. Kids are weird. It's part of their charm. But then came the drawings. Claire picked him up from preschool on a Thursday, and he came home unusually quiet. Not upset, just inward. You learn to spot these things as a parent, the little mood shifts. We didn't push. Just let him have his space. Later that evening, while Claire was getting dinner ready, Evan was at the kitchen table with crayons and paper, furiously scribbling with more focus than I'd ever seen. I walked over, glanced down. He was drawing a house. Our house. 2 windows on the top floor, the porch, even the crooked little bird feeder out front. But the strange part was what was inside the house. In one of the windows he'd drawn a small figure. A man. Stick figure thin, with black scribbles for eyes. No mouth. Just long arms and little black lines for fingers that stretched down past the window frame. Next to him, he'd written in large, clumsy letters. He's watching. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I picked up the drawing and crouched down next to him. Hey buddy, who's this guy? I asked gently. Evan didn't look up. Just grabbed a black crayon and started a new page. He told me not to say. He whispered. Is this the friend from your closet? He nodded, eyes locked on the paper as he drew. What's he watching? Evan hesitated, and for a moment, I thought he wasn't going to answer. But then, in that same low voice, he said, He's waiting for you to stop looking. That night, Claire found another drawing tucked under his pillow. Same stick-thin figure. But this time, it was standing in what looked like our hallway. Just outside Evan's room. I'll admit it, I didn't sleep well that night. The drawing, the weird things Evan said, it all kept circling in my head. I'd wake up every hour, ears straining in the dark, convinced I'd heard footsteps in the hall or creaking floorboards. The next morning, while Claire took a shower, I went in to wake Evan up for breakfast. He was already sitting up in bed, eyes puffy, hair matted on one side. His blanket was bunched around his knees like he hadn't slept much either. Morning, champ, I said, trying to sound light. You sleep okay? He didn't answer at first. Just looked past me at the closet door, which was closed, like always when we put him to bed. But then he said, He was mad last night. I sat on the edge of the bed, heart starting to pick up again. Why was he mad? Because Mommy closed the door. I looked at him, confused. The closet door? No, he said quietly. My door. I blinked. You mean your bedroom door? He nodded slowly, then added, He says he can't come in if it's closed. He doesn't like when you don't let him play. I suddenly felt cold. The house was warm, but something in his voice, it was too serious for a kid that age. Too measured. Not scared, not playful. Just resigned. That night, I left the bedroom door open a crack, just to see what he'd do. After we tucked him in and said goodnight, I stood outside in the hallway, pretending to go downstairs but really just watching from the shadows. A few minutes passed. Evan sat up in bed and looked at the open door. Then, very quietly, he said, Okay. You can come in now. No one entered, of course. I would have seen. But Evan smiled. Like someone had. By this point, Claire was getting worried too. She hadn't said it outright, but I could see it in the way she hovered over Evan more, how she lingered in his doorway at night, how her eyes kept drifting toward the baby monitor on the kitchen counter like she expected it to hiss to life with something unnatural. That Sunday morning, we were all sitting on the floor in the living room building a puzzle together. One of those big, colorful animal ones. Evan was unusually quiet, sliding the pieces into place but not really looking at them. His eyes kept flicking toward the hallway, toward the stairs. Claire tried to pull him back into the moment. "Hey, sweetie, what's this one?" she said, holding up a puzzle piece shaped like a giraffe's head. Evan barely glanced at it. "That one's not right," he murmured. She smiled. "Sure it is, it goes right here." "No," he interrupted, sharper this time. "He said it's not the real giraffe." Claire blinked at him. "Who did?" Evan paused. "My friend." Then, out of nowhere, he turned to her and said, "He knows you lied to Daddy about the phone call." Silence. Claire froze. The color drained from her face. I looked between the two of them, completely thrown. "What phone call?" I asked. Claire looked like she wanted to disappear. "Nothing," she said quickly. It's not important." "Claire." She swallowed hard. "A few months ago, when I said I was on the phone with work, I was actually talking to my mom about something private. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd be upset." I stared at her. "How would he know that?" "Evan, how did your friend know?" Evan just looked at me blankly, like it was the dumbest question in the world. "He hears everything." After that puzzle incident, something shifted in the house. It was subtle at first. Little things. Barely enough to call weird, but just enough to make your gut say that's not right. It started with Evan's toys. He's a routine kid. Loves order. He lines up his toy cars every night before bed, same 5 in a row by the window, wheels facing out. He's done it for months now. But one morning, I came in and found them all stacked in a pyramid. Perfectly balanced. Just standing there. In the center of the room. Like some kind of tiny shrine. I figured maybe Claire did it to surprise him. When I asked her, she just shook her head. "Why would I do that? I thought you did it." Evan, when I asked him, didn't say anything. He just looked at me and whispered, "He likes when things are neat." Later that week, Claire went to grab her keys from the hook by the door and found them gone. We spent half an hour tearing the house apart. Finally found them inside the microwave. None of us put them there. Another time, I left my laptop on the dining room table overnight. I always close it. Always. But the next morning it was wide open. The webcam light was on, glowing in the dark room like a watching eye. Then there were the sounds. Late at night, when the house was supposed to be asleep, I'd hear floorboards creak upstairs. Soft, slow footsteps. I'd go up there, expecting to find Evan out of bed, but he'd be tucked under the covers, dead asleep. Other times, it wasn't footsteps. It was whispering. Too quiet to make out, but definitely not the wind, not the pipes. A dry, rustling whisper, like someone breathing secrets into the walls. The worst part was how normal Evan acted through all of it. As if none of it surprised him. Like he was getting used to it. Like he expected it. We started leaving a night light in Evan's room. Not that he asked for it, he didn't. But something about the dark felt heavier now. Like it pressed harder on the walls. Claire was the one who insisted we set up the baby monitor again. "Just in case," she said, trying to sound casual. But I could tell she didn't by her own tone. The first few nights, nothing. Just the usual tossing and turning, the occasional sleep mumble. But then, one night, just before 3 a.m., the monitor flickered on by itself. It wasn't sound that triggered it, it was motion. I sat up in bed and stared at the small screen on the nightstand. The camera, mounted in the top corner of Evan's room, showed him sitting upright in bed. Not moving. Just sitting there, perfectly still, staring at the closet. His face was turned slightly, eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. I watched, chilled, as he tilted his head, slowly, almost mechanically, to the side. Then he raised one hand and waved. I got out of bed fast, nearly tripping on the sheets, and rushed down the hallway to his room. When I opened the door, he was already lying down again, eyes closed, breathing softly. I checked the monitor again. Normal. I could almost convince myself it was a dream. Or maybe he just woke up for a second. But the next morning, when I asked him if he remembered anything from the night before, he looked at me for a long moment and said, "He came to check on you." "Who?" "You know." I crouched down, looking him in the eye. "Evan, what does he look like?" "Your friend." He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "He changes," he said. "But he always has too many fingers." I started keeping a journal. Not for Evan, for me. To keep track. Because it was all starting to blur together, what happened when, what I thought I saw versus what I knew I did. One night, maybe a week after the monitor incident, I was up late reading. Claire had gone to bed early. I was trying to unwind, but I kept glancing toward the hallway. It felt like someone was standing there. I told myself I was just tired. That I'd been letting Evan's games get under my skin. That the creaks in the walls, the flickering lights, the cold spots, they meant nothing. But then, from the monitor, muted but unmistakable, I heard a voice. Not Evan's. It was low. Dry. A rasp, like wind moving through old curtains. Just 3 words. "Don't turn around." I bolted from my chair and ran to Evan's room. I flung open the door so hard it bounced off the wall. He was sitting up again. Not crying. Not scared. Just waiting. "Who said that?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice level. He didn't answer. Just looked over my shoulder. I turned to follow his gaze. Nothing. Closet door was half open again. I know I shut it earlier. I walked over, yanked it open, and stared into the dark. Clothes. A few toys. That shoebox of coloring books. But it felt like something had just been there. I closed it hard. Evan flinched. "Don't," he whispered. "He doesn't like that." That night, I left the closet open. It was Claire who heard it next. She came into the living room one morning while I was making coffee, pale and trembling. She wasn't a jumpy person, not easily rattled, but her hands were shaking so bad she spilled some of her tea down her shirt without even noticing. "I heard someone," she said. I froze. "Where?" "In Evan's room. Under the bed." I didn't speak. I just stared at her, heart thudding in my chest like a slow drum roll. She swallowed hard. "He was talking to him. At first I thought it was just pretend. But then Evan stopped talking. And I swear to God, I heard something whisper back." "What did it say?" She looked up at me, eyes glistening. "It said, 'She's lying again.'" I didn't ask what it meant. I didn't want to know. That night, I checked under Evan's bed. I made a show of it for him, like a silly routine. "No monsters here," I said, peeking into the shadows. But something was off. The air under there felt dense. Still. Like the space held more than it should. I reached further than necessary, feeling around blindly. And then, I swear, I felt something brush my wrist. Fingers. Cold. Long. I pulled back fast, smacked my head on the frame, stumbled out of the room. Evan didn't laugh. He just watched me with those 2 wide eyes and said, "He just wanted to say hi." I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Claire. And the next morning, Evan didn't come down for breakfast. We found him curled under his bed, asleep, clutching one of my shirts. When I asked him why, he said, "So you don't forget me when he takes me." That morning shook us. Evan had never sleepwalked before. Never hidden under his bed, never talked about being taken. We were done pretending it was all just his imagination. Claire called our pediatrician. I called a child therapist. We made appointments. Told ourselves it was just precaution. Told ourselves it was better to be safe. That same afternoon, while Evan napped on the couch, I decided to check the attic. There's a small crawl space above the 2nd floor, nothing fancy. Just plywood boards, insulation, and enough dust to choke a vacuum. But lately, we'd been hearing sounds from up there. Like dragging. Or soft, slow shuffling. I pulled down the ladder and climbed up, flashlight in hand. The air was stale. Heavy. like the breath of something that didn't belong. I swept the light across the attic. Mostly junk, old holiday decorations, boxes of baby clothes, one of those plastic tubs filled with tangled cords we kept telling ourselves we'd sort one day. But then I saw something I didn't recognize. A small wooden box, tucked in the far corner like someone had tried to hide it behind the insulation rolls. It wasn't ours. I crawled over, pulled it out carefully. The wood was warped with age. No lock, no markings. Inside were three things. A faded Polaroid of a child I didn't recognize, maybe 6 or 7 years old, standing in what looked like our hallway. A small, carved figurine of a man, grotesquely long limbs, fingers down to the knees, no face. And a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. On it, written in jagged handwriting. "He lives in the spaces between. If you see him, it's already too late." I felt a sudden pressure in the air. Like the attic tightened around me. And behind me, on the floorboards, I heard a creak. Just one. Slow. Deliberate. I turned fast, flashlight swinging wildly. No one there. But when I looked back at the box, the figurine was gone. I didn't tell Claire about the box. Not right away. Not because I wanted to keep secrets, but because I didn't know how. What was I supposed to say? "Hey, I found a faceless stickman doll in our attic that vanished when I looked away." She was already barely holding it together. Instead, I went online. I searched everything: imaginary friends, long-fingered entities, whispering in the walls. But it was all the same recycled stories. Slender man shadow people. Creepypasta nonsense. Except one post. Buried deep in a forum about haunted houses, from 8 years ago. A user named Nickstad79 had written, "My son started seeing someone in the closet. Said he didn't have a name. Said he whispered secrets about our family. We moved. Didn't help." The post included a photo. A child's drawing. It was almost identical to one Evan had made. The house, the windows. The long man with no mouth, just scribbled black holes for eyes. And that same line written under it. "He's watching." I messaged the user. No reply. His account hadn't been active in years. I scrolled through his old posts, desperate, and found one mention of a realtor, someone who had sold him the property. I followed the name, tracked listings, dug through archive sites. And then I saw it. The address. Our house. We weren't the first family. We weren't even the second. This thing, whatever it was, stayed. Through different owners, different names on the mailbox, different little kids with wide eyes and too much trust. I sat back in my chair, sick to my stomach. That night I told Claire everything. She didn't laugh. She didn't argue. She just said, "He's feeding off him, isn't he?" That same night, Evan told us about the game. He was sitting in bed, knees pulled to his chest, face pale and tight. Claire sat beside him, running her fingers through his hair, whispering soft comforts she didn't believe anymore. I was at the foot of the bed, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear him when he spoke. "He said if I play, he won't take you." Claire and I locked eyes. "What kind of game, sweetie?" she asked gently. Evan looked at the closet. It was open again. We didn't bother closing it anymore. He got upset when we did. "It's the whisper game," he said. "He hides in the dark and whispers something I have to say out loud." I leaned forward. "What does he whisper?" Evan hesitated. His lip quivered, and I thought he might cry. But instead, he said in this flat, emotionless voice, "He's in your room now." Claire gasped. "Evan." "He told me," he interrupted, staring straight ahead. "He told me what Daddy saw in the attic. And what you said on the phone. And where Mommy keeps the scary thoughts." Claire froze. He turned to her. "He said your brain is like a cracked window." She stood and left the room so fast her chair tipped over behind her. I followed her into the hallway, where she was already sobbing into her hands. "How could he know that?" she whispered. That's exactly what I told my therapist when I had the breakdown. A cracked window. I never said it out loud. Not even to you. Either of us slept. We sat in bed, staring at the closet across the hallway, waiting for something to move. It didn't. But at 3:14 a.m., the baby monitor turned on again. And this time, we heard breathing. But Evan wasn't awake. We checked. We saw him. The breathing wasn't coming from him. It was coming from just outside the camera frame. The next day, I called the realtor who sold us the house. I didn't know what I was going to say. I just knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. To my surprise, he picked up on the second ring. His voice was chipper, friendly, like nothing dark had ever touched this place. But the moment I mentioned the name of the previous owner, the one from the forum post, his tone changed. Went quiet. Careful. Yeah, he said. That family? They left in kind of a hurry. Why? I asked. A long pause. I shouldn't say, he murmured. They had issues. Claimed the house was wrong. Said their son started seeing people that weren't there. Lost a lot of sleep over it. I pressed. Asked if anything had ever happened in the house before them. Police reports. Accidents. Anything strange. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, You should check the crawl space. There's a panel behind the water heater. Sometimes inspectors miss it. He hung up before I could ask another question. That night, after Evan was finally asleep, after checking the monitor 5 times, I went into the garage. The water heater was tucked in the corner behind dusty shelves. I moved them aside and found the panel. Small. Wooden. Painted the same color as the wall. I pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside was a narrow tunnel, barely tall enough to crawl through. No insulation, just cold earth and wooden beams, like the ribs of something long dead. I grabbed a flashlight and crawled inside. The air was thick. Damp. I could hear the house groaning above me, as if it knew I was inside it now, deeper than before. 10 feet in I saw it. Scratches. Claw marks, fingernails, along the beams. Some old, some fresh. And etched into the wood, over and over again, in childish handwriting. He's playing with us. I turned to crawl back out, but froze. There, in the dirt just inches from my face, was a small wooden figurine. The same one from the attic. Only this time, it had a mouth. I brought the figurine inside, even though every instinct told me not to. Claire didn't want it in the house. She told me to burn it. Throw it in the river. Bury it. I kept it anyway. Because something in me, some dark, quiet thing, wanted to understand. Wanted to know what we were up against. That night, we stayed up late, watching the monitor. Evan was asleep. His breathing steady. Calm. At 2:47 a.m., he sat up again. But this time, he wasn't alone. There was a figure standing in the corner. At first, I thought the monitor had glitched, distorted, but then it moved. Slowly, unnaturally. Like a puppet dangling from strings held just out of frame. Long limbs. Thin, bony. Its fingers grazed the floor. And even though its face was blurred, like the camera couldn't focus on it, its eyes weren't. They stared straight into the lens. Straight at us. Claire gasped, backing away. I grabbed the monitor and ran for Evan's room. But when I opened the door, there was nothing. Just Evan. Sleeping. The corner was empty. I stood there, panting, every hair on my arms raised. Then Evan spoke, still asleep. He said you shouldn't have looked at him. The next morning, we found all the photos in the house flipped face down. Every single one. Family pictures. Wedding photos. Evan's drawings on the fridge. Even the one in Claire's locket. All turned over. Like someone was trying to erase us. Later that afternoon, Evan sat down at the table and drew something without being asked. No animals. No people. Just a tall, dark figure, hunched and looming, its fingers stretching past the edges of the paper. Beneath it, he wrote one word, all by himself. Daddy? I stared at it for a long time. And for the first time, I wondered if I'd brought it in with me. If it had never wanted Evan. If it had always wanted me. The day after the drawing, Claire took Evan to her mother's. Said she needed time to think. Said she didn't feel safe anymore. I didn't argue. The house felt wrong. Hollow, but not empty. Like something was waiting to close a door behind me. I stayed. Part of me wanted to believe it would follow them. But the deeper part, the one that had been whispering to me in my own voice, knew better. It wasn't after Evan. It wasn't even after Claire. It was mine now. That night, I walked the house slowly. One last loop. I touched the walls. I looked into mirrors that didn't reflect quite right. I opened the closet, the crawl space, the attic door. I didn't bring a light. Didn't need one. At 3:13 a.m., I sat down in Evan's room. Cross-legged. Facing the closet. Just like he used to. Okay, I said quietly. Let's play. The air thickened. Pressed in on my chest. I didn't see him at first. But I felt him. Felt the stretch of the dark. The cold on my skin. Heard the soft creak of joints bending in ways they shouldn't. Then came the whisper. Right behind my ear. Your turn. And I knew what it meant. I think I always had. They found me the next morning. Sitting exactly where I'd been. Eyes open. Smiling. But I wasn't there anymore. And Evan? Claire says he's doing better. No more drawings. No more whispers. He sleeps with the door closed now. But sometimes, when it's quiet, he asks her a question. Same one every time. Why doesn't Daddy blink anymore?